Hello and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Wednesday, 23 April. Just a bit of a heads up, there won't be a podcast for the rest of this week as I'll be travelling for an event. But we'll be back next week with much better sound quality. So, yeah. Today, we're going to look at Britain has posted a much bigger budget deficit for 2024 and 2025 than expected. Chinese spy bugs have been found in London pubs and parks, say security sources. And Trump offers his final offer for peace in Ukraine. So firstly, Britain's government borrowed almost £15 billion more in the financial year that just ended than the official budget forecasters had estimated a month ago, according to data that heaped more pressure on public finances. Public sector net borrowing for 2024-2025 financial year was £151.9 billion, the Office of National Statistics said on Wednesday. In its forecast published in March, the Office for Budget Responsibility had projected that the budget deficit for the financial year ending in March would be £173.3 billion. That marked the third biggest year for the government borrowing in cash terms on record, with Finance Minister Rachel Reeves' budget plans hinging on a tiny buffer against the government's self-imposed fiscal rules, equivalent to less than 1% of annual spending. Investors are watching public sector finance data more closely. British government bonds have become increasingly volatile in recent years, reflecting unease in the financial markets over Britain's mix of low growth, high debt interest costs, and persistent inflation. A closely watched business survey on Wednesday suggested much of the economy slowed sharply this month. So what? The UK as a whole seems to be in a bit of trouble when it comes to budgeting and spending. And their economy as a whole, really. The price of everything is going up. Outside of London, people aren't making anywhere enough money to support themselves, and benefit usage is going through the roof. To be fair, it's going to be a tough slog for the UK. They don't have much industry left, and they're going to have to take some pretty good hard looks at themselves to ensure that the country doesn't collapse over the next 10 to 20 years. It's going to be pretty interesting, so we'll see what they get up to. And next, spies could be listening in while you sit down for a sandwich at lunch across parks in central London, security insiders have claimed. Park benches and pubs in Westminster have apparently been identified as targets for Beijing. Politicians and parliamentarian researchers have been warned by security sources that seemingly harmless places to sit could have been bugged, so they should be careful of what they talk about outside of the office. Security sources told newspapers on Sunday that there are several known hotspots in the capital where information is exchanged. They say this espionage goes beyond online eavesdropping or honey trappers suggesting a drink, and even includes the foliage of St. James Park. We've been told that the Chinese are literally bugging the parks with devices in bushes and under park benches, one source alleged. They claimed that this was seen as a worthwhile because civil servants and researchers often meet in the park over their lunch breaks. Junior staff in the chambers of power are supposedly seen as soft targets by regimes including Russia, Iran, and China. The idea of the hidden mics on park benches sounds ridiculous, given that if they do exist, whoever has to listen to them is more likely to overhear squabble between a pigeon and a squirrel than anything relevant to national security. So what? While the story does seem a bit ludicrous, it does kind of fit with Chinese intelligence collection, which is often referred to as a dragnet theory rather than spearfishing, which is how the West would describe their intelligence collection. China has the capability and the intent to analyze large volumes of data that includes huge amounts of just useless information to try and discern some golden nuggets. that they could identify. This is just due to the amount of people they have working within their security services, that they have the resources to get these kinds of projects done. Where in the West, it's just not possible. You would have to rely on some kind of tool or, and well, now AI, to try and sweep through the information and identify any points of interest. But it's still pretty interesting, and something to keep aware of if you work in the security sector and hang around in central London in your time off. And lastly, the American administration is awaiting an official response from Ukraine on a controversial piece of framework, which includes the recognition by the US of Crimea as Russian territory and the acceptance of Moscow's de facto control over regions occupied after the 2022 invasion. Vice President J.D. Vance said that the US has made a very explicit proposal to Russia and Ukraine towards a peace deal, and that it is time for them to say yes. Otherwise, the US will give up mediating. The current front lines, or somewhere near them, are where I think the new front lines of the conflict will ultimately be drawn, said the American Vice President after completing a tour of the Taj Mahal. He added that this would mean that Ukraine and Russia should give up the territories they currently control, as reported by Le Monde. There will have to be some kind of territorial exchange, Vance said, adding that although the final border may not exactly match the current front lines, for the fighting to stop, both parties must lay down their arms, freeze the situation, and focus on building a better Russia and a better Ukraine. So what? I mean, this just seems a bit fucking crazy. It's basically an acceptance by the current US administration that perhaps solving the conflict in Ukraine wasn't as easy as they laid out in their build up to their election. Telling Ukraine they have to give up territory, I mean, kind of makes sense, but doing it without providing any forms of security guarantees is just a shit deal. For this to be an effective deal, there needs to be some form of security guarantee given to Ukraine so that they know Russia can't just agree to this deal, go back to the drawing board, refresh their military over the next 2, 3, 5 years, and then do it all again. What's to stop them? If there's no security given by the EU, and they've made it clear there won't be, as Ukraine can't join NATO, I mean. Yeah, it's just a bad deal. It also is just going to encourage other aggressive countries, such as China and Iran, to try and solve their problems through military aggression, as they know if they can just drag out a conflict long enough, that the US, who was supposed to be the big bad wolf in the whole territory, keeping everyone safe and peaceful, will just give up as it's too hard and too costly. I think this is a terrible plan. Without some kind of security guarantee built into it, I don't think it holds up, and I don't think Ukraine will go for it. I don't think the EU will push them to go for it. And I don't know what the US plans to do when they don't go for it, outside of just walking away, which is kind of what Russia wants at this point, right? It's just a bit shit. But that's just my opinion. Thank you for listening to the Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one. See you.